A life, I've come to believe, is not a narrative you write, but one you discover. You think you're the author, meticulously crafting each chapter, controlling the plot, developing the characters. But you're not. You're just the reader, turning the pages, often with a sense of dawning, horrified disbelief at the story that unfolds. If you had asked me a year ago to describe my life story, I would have told you it was a quiet, well-written domestic drama. A tale of simple, predictable, and deeply satisfying contentment. I had a wife, Sophia, a woman whose beauty was a kind of quiet, internal luminescence, a woman I believed loved me with the same steady, unwavering devotion with which I loved her. We had 2 children, Emma and Liam, small, chaotic forces of nature who could fill a room with a joy so pure it was almost a physical presence. I had a job, a respectable, unglamorous career in logistics, that allowed me to be a provider without sacrificing my presence, a rare and precious equilibrium. I was not a man of great wealth or grand ambition, but I was a man who considered himself profoundly fortunate. Life was good. Of course, the most compelling dramas are the ones that begin in tranquility. Looking back now, from the wreckage of that life, I can see the hairline fractures in the foundation, the subtle, ominous foreshadowing I was too content, too naive, to recognize. Sophia's ambition had always been a part of her, a bright, restless fire I had once admired. She was a rising star in the cutthroat, high-gloss world of Maxwell Enterprises, and I had been her staunchest supporter, her proudest cheerleader. But ambition, like fire, can be both a source of warmth and a force of utter destruction. The change was insidious, a slow, creeping alteration of our domestic climate. It began with the late nights, the weekend work, the missed family dinners. "Maxwell's pushing us hard on this new project," she would say, her smile a little too bright, a little too brittle, her phone a permanent, glowing appendage in her hand. And I, the trusting, supportive husband, would nod and believe her. Why wouldn't I? Trust was the very air our marriage breathed. But then, the atmosphere began to thin. The small, intimate rituals that had once been the bedrock of our life together began to erode. Her laughter, a sound that had once been the soundtrack to my life, became a rare, fleeting grace note in a symphony of tired sighs and distracted monotones. She stopped meeting my eyes. And the phone became a third party in our marriage, a silent, demanding lover to whom she gave her most rapt and intimate attention. It buzzed and chimed at all hours, a constant, intrusive presence. She would angle the screen away from me, her shoulders tensing, or she would slip out of the room to take a call, her voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. "Work," she would say, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You know how it is." I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was the pressure of her demanding job, of her equally demanding boss. Maxwell. The name itself became a kind of incantation, a justification for every broken promise, every canceled plan, every new, inexplicable distance that opened between us. His name was a shadow that fell over our dinner table, a ghost that haunted our bed. The children felt it, too. They are barometers of a family's emotional weather, and the pressure in our house was dropping. "Why doesn't Mommy come to my school play anymore?" Emma, our wise, watchful daughter, asked me one night, her question a small, sharp arrow to the heart. I offered a flimsy, inadequate excuse about Mommy's important work, and she nodded, her young face a mask of quiet, profound disappointment. I convinced myself it was a season, a temporary squall that we would weather. But the storm was not passing. It was intensifying. One evening, driven by a desperate, hopeful impulse, I decided to surprise her at her office. I brought her favorite Thai takeout, a small, peace offering, a gesture meant to say, "I'm still here. I still see you, Her assistant, a young woman with kind, pitying eyes, looked at me with a surprise that was not pleasant. "Sophia? Oh, she left hours ago." I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. She came home late that night, her face flushed, her eyes a little too bright. When I asked where she had been, there was a fatal, millisecond hesitation before she launched into a story about a last-minute, off-site client meeting. And in that hesitation, in the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her eyes as she lied to me, I knew. I knew that the story of my life, the quiet, happy domestic drama I had been so enjoying, was about to take a very dark, very unexpected turn. The truth, when it finally revealed itself, did not arrive with a dramatic, thunderous crash. It was a quiet, insidious whisper in the middle of the night. I had gotten up for a glass of water. Her phone, left on the kitchen counter, illuminated with a new message. I did not want to look. Every instinct, every moral fiber of the man I thought I was, screamed at me to turn away. But I couldn't. My hand, as if with a will of its own, reached for the device. The message was from a contact saved only as M. Had a great time tonight. Can't wait to see you again. Asterisk. M. Asterisk Maxwell. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. The quiet, orderly world I had inhabited just moments before was gone, replaced by a chaotic, screaming void. The perfect illusion of my perfect life had not just cracked, it had been atomized. And I knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the granite countertop beneath my hands, that I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. The discovery of the text message was not a revelation, it was a confirmation. It was the single, hard fact that gave shape and form to the formless, free-floating anxiety that had been haunting my life for months. The quiet, domestic drama I thought I was living in was a lie. I was, in fact, the unwitting protagonist in a sordid, cliché-ridden tragedy, and I had just read the first line of the final, devastating act. The initial, primal urge was for confrontation, for a violent, cleansing release of the rage and betrayal that was a hot, acidic bile in my throat. But that urge was quickly supplanted by a colder, more calculating instinct. To confront her now, armed with a single, ambiguous text message, would be to engage in a battle I was not yet prepared to win. She would deny, she would deflect, she would wield her considerable intelligence and charm to twist the narrative, to paint me as the paranoid, insecure husband, and herself as the victim of my mistrust. I knew this woman. I knew her patterns, her defenses. I would not walk into her trap. No, this required a different strategy. A war of intelligence. A quiet, patient gathering of irrefutable proof. I would become a spy in my own home, a silent, watchful observer of the woman who shared my bed but lived in a different world. The work events were the first and most obvious front. Maxwell wants the team to bond, she would say, her reflection in the mirror a cool, distant stranger as she adjusted a new, expensive-looking earring. It's important for morale. These events became a regular feature of our lives. Team-building dinners that stretched late into the night, weekend retreats to boutique hotels, impromptu brainstorming sessions that always seemed to take place over cocktails. She would return from these excursions in the early hours of the morning, smelling of a perfume that was not her own and a wine that we did not keep in our house. Her explanations were always vague, delivered with the weary, dismissive air of a woman too important, too busy, to be burdened with the details. It was fine. A long day. I'm exhausted. Her phone, once a simple tool of communication, became a locked black box of secrets, a constant, humming testament to her other life. She guarded it with a casual ferocity, its screen always angled away, its face always down on the table. If I entered a room while she was on a call, she would end it abruptly, her voice a low, clipped murmur. "Work stuff," she would say. "You know how it is." But I didn't. And the not knowing was a slow, corrosive acid, eating away at the foundations of my sanity. The call that changed everything was a moment of pure, stupid luck. A Wednesday night. She was in the shower, the sound of the water a steady, percussive rhythm. Her phone, for once left unattended on the kitchen counter, began to vibrate, a frantic, insistent buzz against the granite. I glanced at the screen. The name was Maxwell. The call went unanswered, but it was immediately followed by a voicemail notification. I am not proud of what I did next. It was a violation, an act of espionage against the woman I had promised to love and honor. But honor, I was beginning to learn, was a luxury I could no longer afford. I pressed play. "Hey, Sophia." His voice, smooth and confident and dripping with an unearned intimacy, filled my kitchen. "I know you said not to call, but I can't stop thinking about tonight. Call me back when you can. Thinking about tonight." Asterisk, the words were a gut punch, a confirmation of a reality I had been desperately trying to deny. When she came downstairs, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping, I said nothing. I simply watched her, this beautiful, familiar stranger, and I felt a profound and terrifying distance open between us. A chasm so wide I knew I could never cross it. The next day, I called Alex. He was my oldest and most trusted friend, a man whose moral compass was occasionally flexible, and whose skills as a freelance cybersecurity consultant were legendary. I did not need to give him the sordid details. "I need your help," I said, my voice shaking. "It's Sophia. Something's wrong." He didn't ask questions. He was that kind of friend. He came over that evening, his laptop a sleek, silver weapon. "Let's start with the phone," he said, his fingers a blur across the keyboard. He was a magician, a digital warlock. He bypassed her passcode with a contemptuous ease, and within minutes, the entire, ugly, and heartbreaking contents of her secret life were laid bare on his screen. The text messages from Maxwell were a revelation, a masterclass in corporate seduction. They were buried in threads about work projects, a deliberate and clever camouflage. But they were there. "You looked incredible in that meeting today. I couldn't concentrate." Can't stop thinking about that smile. "When can I have you all to myself again?" And then, the photos. A portfolio of their affair. The two of them at a candlelit dinner I had never known about, her face alight with a joy I had not seen in months. A selfie of them in what was unmistakably a hotel room, her in a black dress I didn't recognize, his hand resting proprietarily on the small of her back. I could not breathe. The air in my own home had become unbreathable. Alex looked at me, his usual sardonic humor gone, his face a mask of grim empathy. "I'm sorry, man," he said. "Sorry." The word was a pathetic, inadequate sound in the face of such a monumental betrayal. My wife was not just sleeping with her boss. She was living a parallel life, a life in which I was a ghost, a forgotten, irrelevant footnote. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash things. I wanted to wake her from her peaceful, duplicitous sleep and confront her with the sickening, digital evidence of her treason. But I didn't. To do so would be to give in to the chaos, to the hot, messy, and ultimately unproductive release of rage. No, this was not a crime of passion. This was a calculated, long-term deception, and it required a calculated, long-term response. I thanked Alex and sent him home. I sat alone in the dark. The damning images burned onto the inside of my eyelids. My two beautiful children sleeping peacefully upstairs, and I made a vow. She thought she could have it all. She thought she could have her perfect family and her sordid affair, her devoted husband and her powerful lover. She was wrong. I did not yet know how. But I knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the floor beneath my feet, that I would make them both pay. The invitation to dinner was not a surprise. It was an inevitability. Maxwell was a man who did not just conquer territories. He occupied them. He had conquered my wife, and now he was coming to survey his new domain, my home. "He just wants to connect with the family," Sophia had said, her tone a masterpiece of feigned casualness. "It's a good opportunity for us." Us? The word was a bitter, ironic joke. But I agreed. I agreed because to refuse would be to show my hand, to reveal the knowledge that was my only weapon. And I agreed because I wanted to see him. I wanted to take the measure of the man who had so casually and completely dismantled my life. He arrived at our home not as a guest, but as a visiting monarch. His suit was a testament to his wealth, a perfectly tailored armor of dark, expensive wool. He exuded a sense of entitlement so profound it was almost a physical force, altering the very atmosphere of the rooms he moved through. He barely acknowledged my existence, a curt, dismissive nod in my direction before his full, undivided, and proprietary attention was focused on Sophia. "Dinner smells amazing, Sophia," he said, his voice a low, intimate purr, as he placed a hand on the small of her back, a gesture of ownership that was both subtle and brutally explicit. I watched, my jaw clenched, my own performance of the oblivious, welcoming husband a feat of almost superhuman control. We sat at my dining room table, a place of 1,000 happy, chaotic family meals, and the tension was a fourth, unwelcome guest. Maxwell held court, a raconteur of his own glorious narrative. He spoke of his business triumphs, of his exclusive vacations, of his casual intimacy with the powerful and the famous. He was not just having a conversation. He was delivering a monologue, a sermon on the gospel of his own greatness. And his sermon was punctuated by a series of small, carefully aimed digs at me. "So, David," he said, swirling the wine in his glass with the affected grace of a man who has seen too many movies. "Sophia tells me you're in logistics?" He said the word as if it were a rare and unfortunate medical condition. "I keep the world moving," I replied, my voice a flat, even tone. I would not rise to the bait. "Admirable," he said, with a smirk that was the very definition of condescension. "One box at a time. It's amazing, really, how some people can find contentment in such ordinary lives. It takes a special kind of humility, don't you think?" That was it. The first, open declaration of war. I placed my fork down with a deliberate, audible click. "You must be a deeply insecure man," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the sharp, cold weight of my full and undivided attention. "To come into another man's home and feel the need to belittle him in front of his own family." The room fell silent. Maxwell's smirk faltered, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. Sophia gasped, a small, strangled sound. He recovered quickly, his arrogance a resilient, well-practiced shield. He leaned forward, his voice a low, menacing purr. "I'm just an honest man, David. And honestly, a man has to assert himself in this world. If you can't handle a little friendly competition," his words trailed off, the threat hanging in the air between us. "I think you've overstayed your welcome," I said, my voice as cold and hard as forged steel. "David, stop," Sophia cried, her face a mask of panicked disbelief. "He's our guest." "Is he our guest, Sophia?" I asked, turning my gaze to her. "Or is he your partner?" The words landed like a physical blow. The color drained from her face. Maxwell stood, adjusting the lapels of his suit jacket, a gesture of regained composure. "You should watch your tone, David," he said, taking a step towards me. "I could make things very, very difficult for you, for your family." And then, in a moment of such breathtaking, monumental arrogance, he raised his hand, not in a fist, but open-palmed, as if to deliver a dismissive, paternalistic slap. Instinct, a primal, long-dormant animal instinct, took over. I moved before I was even consciously aware of it. I caught his wrist mid-air, my grip a vice. I twisted. The sound was not loud, but it was sickeningly distinct. A sharp, wet crack of bone and cartilage. He howled, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain and shock, and staggered back, cradling his broken hand, his face a contorted mask of rage and disbelief. "David, what the hell is wrong with you?" Sophia shrieked, rushing to his side, her allegiance now declared in the most definitive way possible. "You didn't have to do that, didn't I?" I shot back, my own voice a stranger's, a low, dangerous growl. "He threatened me. He threatened our children. He tried to strike me. In my own home. And you are defending him." "He's my boss," she yelled, the words a pathetic, desperate attempt at justification. "No, Sophia," I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, lethal whisper. "He's not just your boss. Don't you dare insult my intelligence." She looked away, a fleeting shadow of guilt crossing her face, before she turned her attention back to her wounded lover, helping him towards the door. "You've lost your mind," she hissed at me as they left. But I hadn't. For the first time in a very long time, I was seeing things with a perfect, terrible clarity. This was not a love affair. This was a hostile takeover. And I had just repelled the first wave of the invasion. Sophia had chosen her side. The lines were drawn. And the war had just begun. The snapping of Maxwell's wrist was a starting pistol. The quiet, cold war of suspicion and silent observation was over. A hot war had begun. In the immediate aftermath of his ignominious retreat, a strange and terrible calm descended upon the house. Sophia was gone, having escorted her wounded lover to whatever opulent sanctuary he called home. The children were asleep, blissfully unaware of the seismic event that had just occurred in their living room. I was alone, in the wreckage, my own hand throbbing with a phantom pain, my mind a whirring engine of strategy and rage. Maxwell was not just an arrogant adulterer. He was a predator who used his power as a weapon. His threat had not been idle. He would come after me. He would come after my family. I had to assume he would use every tool at his disposal, his wealth, his influence, his army of lawyers. To fight him, I needed my own arsenal. My first move was to try and understand the true nature of the beast. The next morning, I began to dig. Maxwell Enterprises was a fortress, its public image a carefully constructed facade of success and philanthropy. But fortresses, I knew, often have hidden, rotten foundations. The whispers were there, if you knew where to look. Anonymous posts on employee review websites, buried comments on old financial news articles. Words like cover-up, hush money, cooked books. It was a trail of digital breadcrumbs leading into a very dark forest. But I needed more than rumors. I needed a guide. And that's when I remembered a name, a story from a few months back. Sarah Jensen, a former mid-level executive at Maxwell Enterprises who had resigned abruptly and had been the subject of a brief, intense, and then suspiciously quiet media flurry about a toxic work environment. She had blown a whistle, and someone, undoubtedly Maxwell, had managed to silence it. Finding her was not easy. She had, it seemed, gone to ground. But through a series of persistent, creative online searches, I found a digital footprint, a contact. I sent a carefully worded email, not revealing the full extent of my personal drama, but hinting that I had my own reasons for being interested in the truth about her former boss. To my surprise, she replied within hours. We met in a quiet, anonymous coffee shop, a neutral territory for the trading of dangerous secrets. Sarah Jensen was a woman who had been through a fire. She was sharp, wary, and radiated an aura of coiled, controlled anger. I've been waiting for someone like you to call, she said, after I had laid out a sanitized version of my story. I knew it was only a matter of time before his arrogance became his undoing. I told her everything then. The affair, the confrontation, the threats. She listened, her expression a mask of grim, unsurprised recognition. Your wife isn't the first, she said, her voice flat. She won't be the last. It's his pattern. He finds ambitious, talented women. He seduces them, not just physically, but professionally. He makes them believe they are special, that they are his partner. And then, when he's done with them, he discards them. But that's just the appetizer. The main course, that's the business. She opened her laptop. I worked in finance at Maxwell Enterprises for 8 years, she said. I saw everything. What she showed me was a revelation. It was a labyrinth of corporate malfeasance, so intricate and so audacious, it was almost beautiful in its corruption. Embezzlement. Fraudulent accounting. A network of shell companies used to launder money and funnel profits into offshore accounts. Bribes to city officials. Intimidation of competitors. It was all there, documented in spreadsheets, internal emails, and secret memos she had copied before she had been forced out. He's not just a cheat, David, she said, her eyes burning with a cold, righteous fire. He's a gangster in a tailored suit. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? I asked. Money. Power. Fear, she said. He buys silence. Or he creates it. A new, more terrifying thought occurred to me. Sophia, do you think she knows about any of this? Sarah hesitated. It's hard to say. Maxwell is compartmentalized. But if she's as close to him as you say she is, she's seen something. Heard something. Whether she understands what she's seeing is another question. To him, she's not a partner. She's collateral. A tool. And when a tool is no longer useful. The thought was a chilling one. Sophia was not just an adulteress. She was a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game than she could possibly imagine. I left that coffee shop with a USB drive in my pocket that was more explosive than a stick of dynamite. My mission had changed. This was no longer just about protecting my family from an arrogant bully. It was about dismantling a criminal empire. Be careful, David, Sarah had warned me as I left. If he finds out you're digging, he won't hesitate to come after you. With everything he has. I nodded, my jaw tight. Let him try, I said. I'm not afraid of him. And I wasn't. Fear was a luxury I could no longer afford. I had stared into the abyss of my own life's destruction, and I had survived. Maxwell thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn that everyone, no matter how powerful, has a vulnerability, and I was going to find his. The war with Maxwell required a two-front strategy. One front was the slow, meticulous work with Sarah, piecing together the evidence that would, I hoped, lead to his professional annihilation. The other, more immediate and infinitely more painful front, was my own home. To set the trap for Maxwell, I had to first create the illusion of a truce with Sophia. I had to become a performer, a master of a duplicity that was a mirror image of her own. The irony was not lost on me, and it tasted like ashes in my mouth. The reconciliation, when I initiated it, was a carefully staged production. I approached her one evening, after the children were asleep, my posture a study in weary, heartbroken contrition. "Sophia," I began, my voice a carefully calibrated instrument of regret. "We need to talk." She was wary, her eyes guarded. But she was also, I could tell, desperate. Her life was in a state of chaotic freefall, and I was her only remaining anchor. "I know things have been a mess," I said, sighing. "And I know I haven't handled it well. But I want to try to fix this. For the kids. For us." I could see the relief flood her features. She thought I was capitulating. She thought the clueless, forgiving husband was reasserting himself. She could not conceive that this was not an act of love, but an act of war. "Oh, David," she said, her voice thick with a gratitude that was almost obscene. "I want that too." And so, I began to play my part. I became the doting, attentive father, a constant, reassuring presence in my children's lives. I took over the morning routines, the school runs, the homework help. This was not just a performance, it was a necessity. I was documenting, in the most tangible way possible, my role as their primary caregiver. Sophia, freed from the mundane responsibilities of motherhood, retreated further into her other life, the one that revolved around Maxwell. She was distant, distracted, her days and nights a blur of hushed phone calls and late-night work emergencies. I did not question her. I simply watched. Her phone, once a locked fortress, was now a source of invaluable intelligence. While she slept, I would carefully document its contents. Not just screenshots, but a meticulous log of texts, of call histories, of location data. Every lie, every secret rendezvous, every whispered intimacy was entered into the dossier. Her neglect of the children was a tragedy that unfolded in slow motion. She missed Emma's piano recital, a last-minute client dinner, taking precedence. She forgot to sign Liam's permission slip for a field trip, an oversight that left him in tears. I was there to pick up the pieces, to comfort, to reassure, and to document. Each instance was a small, painful nail in the coffin of her parental rights. While I gathered the domestic evidence, Sarah and I prepared the financial bombshell. The dossier she had compiled was a masterpiece of forensic accounting, a detailed, undeniable map of Maxwell's criminal enterprise. We decided on a strategy of anonymous, staggered leaks. Not to the press, not yet. That would give him time to spin the narrative. Instead, we sent the first, most damning evidence directly to the SEC and the IRS. We lit the fuse and stood back to wait for the explosion. The first tremors were felt within weeks. Maxwell's carefully curated world began to shake. He became more volatile, more paranoid. Sophia bore the brunt of his anxiety. I would hear her on the phone with him, her voice a tense, placating murmur. "It'll blow over," she would say. "They have nothing on you." One night, I knew it was time to spring the final part of the trap. I set up a small, hidden camera in our living room. I waited until she was on another one of her late-night calls with him, pacing the room like a caged animal. "David doesn't know anything," I heard her say, her voice sharp with a desperate, misplaced confidence. "He's too wrapped up in the kids to notice anything. He's predictable." The words were a fresh, sharp stab, but they were also a gift. They were the final, perfect piece of evidence I needed. When she hung up the phone, I confronted her. I did not raise my voice. I simply laid the evidence on the coffee table. The printed text messages, the call logs, the photographs of her neglect, and finally, a still image from the video I had just recorded, her own words a damning caption beneath her panicked face. "You think I don't know?" I said, my voice as quiet and cold as the grave. "I know everything, Sophia, and you have no idea what's coming." She stared at the mountain of her own betrayal, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The trap had been sprung, and she was caught in its teeth. The decision to weaponize Maxwell's own monstrous ego was not a difficult one. He was a man who lived in a hall of mirrors, his own reflection the only thing he truly adored. To destroy him, I had to shatter that reflection. And I knew exactly who held the hammer. His wife, Clarissa. Clarissa Maxwell was not just a spouse. She was a brand ambassador. A woman of impeccable breeding, flawless style, and a social standing that was a crucial component of Maxwell's own public persona. She was the elegant, unimpeachable proof of his success. To expose his affair to her would be to strike at the very heart of his carefully constructed identity. It would hurt Sophia, yes, but my war was no longer with my wife. She was merely collateral damage in a much larger conflict. My war was with him. The email I sent to Clarissa was a masterpiece of cold, clinical precision. It was not the emotional screed of a betrayed husband, but the dispassionate report of a whistleblower. Mrs. Maxwell, I wrote, I apologize for this unsolicited intrusion. However, I believe you are entitled to the truth about your husband's professional and personal conduct. The attached file contains evidence of his ongoing affair with my wife, Sophia, one of his employees. I leave it to you to decide what to do with this information. Sincerely, David, *. The attached file was a curated collection of the most damning evidence. The hotel room photograph, the most explicit text messages, the call logs from their late-night conversations. It was undeniable. Her reply was swift and equally cold. Redwood Cafe. Tomorrow. Noon. She was exactly as I had imagined, a woman of terrifying, aristocratic composure. She sat across from me in the quiet, sunlit cafe, a marble statue of controlled fury. Is this real? She asked, her voice a low, dangerous whisper, as she slid the folder back across the table. Yes, I said. I wish it weren't. She was silent for a long, unnerving moment. Then, she looked at me, her eyes as cold and hard as diamonds. You have given me a great deal to consider, Mr. David. Do not contact me again. And with that, she was gone. I didn't need to contact her. The first tremor of the earthquake she was about to unleash was felt within days. The news of the Maxwells' impending divorce was not just a gossip column item. It was a financial headline. Clarissa's filing was a work of art, a document of such brutal, surgical precision that it left no room for interpretation. She cited irreconcilable differences stemming from her husband's serial infidelity and financial malfeasance, a phrase that was a dog whistle to the entire financial world. The media went into a frenzy. Maxwell, the untouchable titan of industry, was suddenly a tabloid caricature, a cliché of the powerful, cheating husband. His business partners began to distance themselves. Investors grew nervous. The stock price of Maxwell Enterprises began a slow, steady, and then precipitous decline. The fallout for Sophia was equally swift and brutal. The affair, once a secret known only to a few, was now the subject of rampant speculation and gossip. Her friends, the ones who had been her loyal court, began to desert her. Their calls were no longer supportive, but accusatory. How could you, Sophia? One of them demanded in a voicemail I overheard. To David? To your children? Her own family, who had once adored her, now treated her with a cold, disappointed disdain. She was an outcast, a pariah in the very social world she had been so desperate to conquer. I did not revel in her suffering, but I did not feel pity, either. She had made her choices. These were the consequences. At home, she was a ghost, a specter of shame and regret. David, we have to talk, she would say, her voice a thin, pleading whisper. There is nothing to talk about, Sophia. I would reply, my voice a flat, impenetrable wall. You chose him. You chose this. Now you have to live with it. Maxwell's empire was crumbling. Sophia's world was in ruins. But this was not the endgame. This was just the softening of the target. The final, decisive battle was yet to be fought. And it would be fought over the only thing that truly mattered to me, my children. The courtroom was a sterile, unforgiving theater, and I was about to give the performance of my life. The battle for my children was the final, most crucial front in my war against the wreckage of my old life. Sophia had made her choices, choices that had led to the demolition of our family. I would not allow our children to become casualties of her poor judgment. My lawyer, Ethan, a man whose calm demeanor belied a litigator's killer instinct, had been clear. We're going for full custody, David. No compromises. Your evidence of her neglect, her infidelity, and her prioritization of Maxwell over the children is a powerful narrative. We just have to present it without emotion. And so, I became a man of pure, cold fact. I sat in that courtroom, a quiet, stoic figure, while the story of the last year of my life was dissected and displayed for a stranger in a black robe to judge. When I took the stand, my voice was steady. I did not speak of my own heartbreak, my own rage. I spoke of the children. I spoke of Emma's piano recital, of the empty seat beside me where her mother should have been. I presented the text messages from Sophia to Maxwell from that night, messages that spoke of a boring corporate dinner she was enduring. I spoke of Liam, sick with a fever, crying for a mother who was at a late-night brainstorming session at a five-star hotel. I presented the hotel receipt. I detailed her absences, her distractions, her emotional and physical abandonment of her maternal responsibilities. The folder of evidence, once a source of my private pain, was now a public record of her failure. When it was Sophia's turn, she was a shadow of her former self. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, a woman manipulated by a powerful, predatory boss, a stressed career woman trying to do it all. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the narrative of her neglect too consistent. On the stand, she crumbled. I made mistakes, she wept, the tears a genuine, pathetic torrent of self-pity. But I love my children. I want to be in their lives. But her love, as Ethan so brutally and effectively argued, had become a secondary consideration, a distant second to her ambition and her affair. Mr. David, Ethan said in his closing argument, his voice ringing with a quiet, powerful authority, has been the sole, consistent, and stable parent in these children's lives for the better part of a year. He has been both mother and father, while his wife was otherwise occupied. The best interests of the children are not a matter of debate. They are a matter of fact. The judge, a woman with tired, wise eyes, delivered her verdict with a swift, decisive finality. Full legal and physical custody was awarded to me. Sophia was granted supervised visitation, her parental rights contingent on a psychological evaluation and a 6-month review. She broke down completely, a single, desolate sob echoing in the quiet courtroom. I felt no triumph. I felt no joy. There is no victory in the public evisceration of the mother of your children. There was only a profound, hollow relief. The battle was over. My children were safe. As I walked out of the courthouse, into the bright, indifferent sunlight, Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. You did the right thing, David. I nodded, my thoughts already on Emma and Liam. The war was not truly won. The wounds were deep, and the scars would be permanent. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt like we had a future. A broken, complicated, and difficult future, yes. But a future. And that was everything. The fall of the House of Maxwell was not a quiet, dignified affair. It was a spectacular, public implosion, a modern-day morality play played out on the glowing screens of 1,000 news outlets. And I, the quiet, unassuming man from logistics, had been the one to light the fuse. The initial leak of the financial documents to the regulatory agencies had been the first, decisive blow. The official investigations that followed were a slow, inexorable tightening of a noose around Maxwell's neck. But it was the second, more personal leak that truly sealed his fate. Sarah and I had debated the ethics of it. The files on Maxwell's private devices, the ones that contained not just his financial crimes but the unfiltered, arrogant ramblings of his own monstrous ego, were a powerful, but dirty, weapon. He deserves it, Sarah had said, her voice hard. He built his empire on the destruction of others. It's time the world saw the real man behind the curtain. And so, we released them. A curated selection of the most damning emails and video clips, delivered anonymously to a handful of the most voracious and influential media outlets. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The headlines changed overnight. Maxwell was no longer just a white-collar criminal. He was a national punchline. The video of him at a private dinner, drunkenly boasting about how people are sheep and how he could sell ice to an Eskimo and then foreclose on his igloo, went viral. Late-night talk show hosts had a field day. Memes of his smug, arrogant face were plastered across the internet. His personal emails were even more damaging. His contempt for his own partners, his misogynistic rants about female employees, his gleeful descriptions of his own manipulative tactics. It was a portrait of a man with no moral compass, no empathy, no soul. His social and professional world evaporated. Friends, partners, political allies, they all scattered like rats from a sinking ship, issuing public statements of condemnation and shock. His wife, Clarissa, not only finalized their divorce in record time, but she issued a press release through her lawyer describing him as a pathological narcissist and a disgrace to humanity. Maxwell Enterprises, once a titan of industry, collapsed under the weight of the scandal. Its stock became worthless. Its clients fled. The board of directors, in a desperate act of self-preservation, forced him out and began the long, arduous process of rebranding and restructuring. He was not just ruined, he was erased. The man who had been so obsessed with his own legacy was now a cautionary tale, a synonym for corporate greed and personal depravity. I watched it all unfold from the quiet sanctuary of my own home, a silent, detached observer. There was a grim satisfaction in it, yes, a sense of a cosmic balancing of the scales. But there was no joy. His destruction had not healed my own wounds. It had not restored my family. One evening, Emma came into the living room as a news report on Maxwell's impending criminal trial flickered on the screen. "Are you smiling, Daddy?" she asked, her voice filled with a child's simple curiosity. I looked at her bright, innocent face, and I pulled her into a hug. "Because sometimes, sweetheart," I said, "the bad guys get what they deserve." His reign was over. His power was gone. His name was a curse. And in the quiet, profound silence of his absence, I could finally begin to hear the sound of my own life again. I did not expect her to come back. I had, in fact, taken great pains to ensure that she could not. The legal and emotional barricades I had erected around my new life were formidable. And yet, there she was, a ghost on my doorstep on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, looking smaller, paler, and more broken than I could have ever imagined. The children were at a friend's house. The house was quiet. The knock on the door was a startling, unwelcome intrusion. I opened it to find Sophia, drenched and shivering, her once confident posture now a question mark of shame and desperation. "David," she whispered, her voice a raw, shaky thing. "Can we please talk?" I did not want to. I wanted to close the door and erase her from my life as completely as she had once tried to erase me from hers. But I stepped aside. I was not a monster. She stood in the foyer, dripping onto the hardwood floor, her eyes darting around the room as if it were a foreign country. This house, our house, the one she had so casually abandoned, was now my fortress, my sanctuary, and her presence in it was a violation. "I'm sorry, David," she began, the words a familiar, tired refrain. "I know I've said it before, but—" "You're right," I interrupted, my voice distant, detached. "You have said it before. It doesn't mean any more now than it did then. Please," she begged, taking a step closer, her eyes pleading. I was lost. Maxwell, he twisted everything. He made me believe that our life, that you, weren't enough. But I see now. I was so wrong. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, you, the kids. Please, David, give me another chance. I'll do anything." I looked at her, at this woman who was a stranger to me, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt had cooled into a hard, dense scar tissue. All that was left was a profound, weary emptiness. "You didn't just lose everything, Sophia," I said, my voice calm, clinical. "You threw it away, and that is not my fault. It is not my responsibility to fix the wreckage you made of your own life." Her face crumpled. She sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, her head in her hands. "I love you, David," she sobbed. "I love the children." "Love," I repeated, the word a bitter, alien sound. "You have a very strange way of showing it. You spent a year lying to me. You abandoned your children. You chose him, again and again and again. That isn't love, Sophia. That's selfishness. That's a pathology." She looked up, her face a mess of tears and mascara. "But what about our family? What about what we had?" "We had a family," I corrected her. "You destroyed it. Now, I have a family. Me, and Emma, and Liam. We are building something new. Something honest. And there is no room in it for you." The finality of the words seemed to land with a physical force. She did not argue. She did not beg. She simply nodded, a slow, defeated gesture of acceptance. She stood and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back, one last, desperate look in her eyes. "I will always love you, David," she whispered. I did not reply. I watched through the window as she walked away, a small, solitary figure disappearing into the gray, indifferent rain. And as the door closed on the final, tragic chapter of our shared story, I felt not sadness, not anger, not even pity. I felt a profound and overwhelming sense of peace. The ghost was gone. The fever had broken, and I was, at long last, free. The first morning of my new life was a revelation. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet. A peaceful quiet. It was the sound of a new beginning. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in my hand, and I watched my children, Emma and Liam, bicker playfully over the last pancake. And I smiled. A real, genuine, unburdened smile. The scars of Sophia's betrayal would, I knew, always be a part of me. They were a map of the territory I had crossed, a testament to the battles I had fought and won. But they were no longer open wounds. They did not define me. My life became a quiet, deliberate act of reconstruction. I poured my energy not into forgetting the past, but into building a new, more authentic future. I was not just a father. I was a creator, and my children were my masterpiece. We filled the house with laughter. We redecorated, erasing the last vestiges of Sophia's aesthetic and replacing it with our own chaotic, joyful clutter. We created new traditions, new rituals, new memories. We were a small, broken, and utterly beautiful family. Maxwell, from his prison cell, became a distant, pathetic footnote in the story of my life. His empire was a ruin, his name a synonym for disgrace. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale, a bad guy who had gotten what he deserved. Sophia, I heard through the grapevine, was trying to rebuild her own life. She had moved to a new city, taken a new, more modest job. She saw the children on her court-appointed supervised visits, and our interactions were polite, distant, and strictly logistical. There was no anger between us anymore. There was simply nothing. I found a new, quiet rhythm. My work was fulfilling. My friendships were deep and true. And my love for my children was the unwavering, true north of my life. I did not seek out a new relationship. I was not ready. Maybe I would never be. But I was not lonely. My life was full. One evening, as I was tucking Emma into bed, she looked up at me, her eyes wide and serious. "Daddy," she said, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at her sweet, trusting face, and I felt a surge of love so powerful it was almost overwhelming. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice steady and sure, "we are going to be more than okay." And in that moment, I knew it was the truest thing I had ever said. The story of my life had not been the one I would have written for myself. It had been a story of betrayal, of loss, of profound and unimaginable pain. But it had also become a story of resilience, of redemption, and of the quiet, unbreakable strength of a father's love. It was not a perfect story, but it was ours, and it was enough.